Trinity?
No, Christ Community Church.
Okay.
Bill Copeland, probably.
So you weren't there when John was?
John was my biggest mentor, no doubt.
That is
John's still
exactly
there,
right.
but he retired.
Okay, first of all, good evening.
Good
to Each and
evening.
every one who gathered tonight, and thank you for those who joined us by, um, whatever, free conference call, that's what it's called. Amen. Well, tonight I'm talking about insurance. I was looking for more young adults, and we have some good seniors here, and we have one other young person somewhere around here, Deacon. And but I want to introduce you to Mr. Bill Nuckles. He works for Farm Bureau Insurance. I know him and met him at Christ Community Church. Then John Manzano was the pastor, and got to know him. And he has, I think he covers all my grandchildren, I think with the exception of 3. And I happen to have 20 pay life on my grandchildren, with the exception, I think, of 3. My daughter, yeah, that's right, my youngest daughter. But what I have enjoyed, he's not high pressure, but he's honest. And being that he's a believer in Jesus, that makes a difference as well. And so I invited him to come at the last minute, and he agreed, and I appreciate his coming. And so I wanted him to talk to us about insurance. And if you got questions, you need to ask. Even if you're still looking for insurance, you need to ask. And I believe he can help us. Mr. Bill Nuckles.
Well, thank you. Anything? A little closer. Okay. Thank you very much for having me here today. Just thought I'd go over, Reverend Edwards asked me to sort of help make some clarity with life insurance. Not everybody, it can seem like a complex issue, but I try to make it as simple as possible, of course. There's some companies that sell stuff that we don't. I think what we sell are what most people need. And that has to do with what's considered permanent, or what some people know as whole life insurance, or temporary, or what a lot of people know as term insurance. And there's always a big question as to what, the difference between the two are. The whole life, there are different types of whole life or permanent coverage. And there are different reasons to have different coverage, of course. I usually sit down with people and try to figure out first what their needs are. And that has to do with just basically looking at their basic needs for whatever they're trying to accomplish. Not everybody can accomplish all the needs they have, but something's better than nothing. Because a lot of people walk around out there, I'm finding, with nothing. And, it's the biggest problem that I see is when people pass away and the family, there's no life insurance in place. There's no money in place to bury them. There's no money in place to even cremate them or whatever. And that burden falls on the family. And then it creates turmoil within the family. And nobody likes to see that. It can break a family up. It can just be really nasty. But anyway, getting back to whole life, we sell 3 different types of whole life. There's straight whole life, which you pay on basically forever until the end of life. Okay, that's less expensive to pay for it that way to begin with, but it's not really the best way to do it. The best way to do it is the same way that Reverend Edwards and I have done it for our kids and grandkids, as well as myself. I wish I'd have done it earlier in life, but I haven't been an insurance agent all my life. I've been an insurance agent for 17 years. So there's such a thing called 20 payment life. 20 payment life is what we have and what we believe is to be the best type of policy It's a little more expensive than the straight whole life, but you pay for it for 20 years and then it's paid up. So me buying it for my grandchild, I've got 2 grandkids right now, and I just recently bought them both policies. In 20 years, they'll be paid up. Okay. So at that point, they'll be going off on their own and doing their own thing and buying houses, and they'll need term life insurance to cover like a mortgage or children's education in case something happens to, the parents or whatever. They will need term for replacement of income for a spouse, maybe. That's huge. So term is less expensive than whole life. So you can buy a lot more of it for a lot less money, but there's no cash value. There's no dividends that are paid into it. So it does not increase in value. It's just there for that period of time, say 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. My wife and I recently, our 30-year term policy just recently ended. Okay. So I thought at the time that would be, I wasn't an insurance agent at the time, but my agent with Farm Bureau actually came over to our house and talked to us, and we had just started having kids, and explained this kind of the same way I'm explaining it to you. The 30-year term for us was just recently over. I'll be 65 this year. So I decided we still have a little bit of mortgage left. We don't have the kids around anymore. We don't have a lot of debt other than the mortgage. So if something happened to me and I'm still working, and I'm planning on working for maybe till I'm 70, something would be difficult for my wife to stay where she's at, or at least continue the standard of living that we're living now. And I'd like for that to continue for her. And the same goes for me if something happened to her, because she's still working, doing without her income. It would be hard for me to pay the mortgage. I'm sure would downsize. She probably wouldn't. Anyway, does that, well, there is one more type of whole life. There is a single premium life insurance policy that is paid up with one lump payment. Okay, so I've had some grandparents that come into some money. Maybe they have inherited some money and they wanted to do something for grandkids or even their kids for that matter. And they'll take $10,000 and buy a $50,000 policy paid up with one lump sum. So then there's no more payments, but that policy always at least is worth $10,000. But in the end, because dividends are paid into it, it's worth a lot more over the years. So you can't look at whole life insurance as an investment. We can't talk about it that way, but it is an asset to you, of course. Anything that's going to increase in value and it does not get taxed in the end. Life insurance doesn't get taxed. So if they're paying 3% dividends into it, which is better than most banks are going to pay you having money in the bank anyway, and you don't get taxed on it, it's a pretty decent, I can't call it investment, but it's a pretty decent asset that grows. We'll put it that way. Does that make sense? All right. So term or temporary has no cash value. All right. What you're purchasing is, like I said, a 10-year, a 20-year, or a 30-year term. Now, I'm too old to buy a 30-year term. I'm too old to buy a 20-year term. They won't let me buy it at my age. Like I said, I'm 64. My average lifespan is going to be about 86. Hopefully I'll live longer than that. As long as it's a good life. But 94% of term policies never pay out. And the reason for that is people outlive them. But that other 6%, it works out really well for because they really needed it. So there's kind of a gamble there, but what a lot of people do is they'll buy a term policy when they're younger, which is what I did to begin with, because I had to be pulled into this buying a life insurance thing by my wife kicking and screaming because I wasn't an insurance agent at the time. And I didn't think we needed it. I was pretty hard-headed. So she said, we're going to listen to the presentation from our insurance agent, and we're going to at least listen to it and see, what we can afford. So the term I felt like we could afford, we bought that 30-year term to begin with, but for 10 years, you can convert it into whole life with no medical. Doesn't matter what your health is, anything could be wrong with you. They have to convert as much of that as you want. So that's a nice feature to have, and we took advantage of it eventually after I got into the insurance business and understood this more and understood how I'm going to need it. That's why I say I wish I'd have gotten that whole life earlier in life because it was less expensive back when I was 30 as opposed to 50. But, I'm hard-headed. At least I was a lot more so back then. So, term policies are convertible for a certain period of time, a 10-year term for 5 years, a 20-year for 10 years, and a 30-year for 10 years. After that, you can still buy whole life, but you're going to get looked at medically, and you're going to have to go through a physical medical, consideration as to where they will put you, whether they'll write you standard or they rate you, or whether it's going to be rated a class B or C or D or whatever, which costs more money because you've got all these things wrong with you after you've waited so long to get it. Because diabetes, high blood pressure, lots of medical ailments come along at 40, 50, 60 years old. They just kind of show up on all of us. And those things have an effect on how they're going to rate it and what they're going to charge you, or whether they'll write it for you at all. So it's kind of important to get it early. The term life insurance for young people and even for some older people, because now I just have the term that I'm paying on. It's there to cover my mortgage. What younger people can do is add a child term rider, and no matter how many kids they have, it's $7.91 a month for, let's say they have 5 kids. It's the same price for one as it is for 5. Now, what that is, it's a term policy that lasts until they're 25 years old, and then they can convert it into permanent whole life if they want to, without a medical. So something could happen to their health while they're young, and they still can convert that. So that's $20,000 worth of coverage for each child, and I do that one a lot. I like to see people get the 20 payment life if they can do it on the kids, just like I've done on my grandkids. I'm paying $30 a month for each grandkid, 29 and 30, I believe, or one's a male, one's a female, and the girls are less expensive than the boys. But that's an inexpensive way to get the kids in on a policy till they're 25, and then you can convert that, or you can just let it go for that matter. But it does give them coverage. That is a policy that paid out on my nephews. 2 of my nephews got killed at 23 in a car accident, and they were 3 years away from each other. 3 years, or 2 years difference in age, but died both at 23. One of them flipped the car over and killed another guy in the car with him. He was into riding around, fast cars. Went around a curve too fast and flipped it over, killed both of them. So his parents had a $20,000 child term rider on him, and that paid out for him as well as it did his brother. And thankfully, they still have a daughter that is still alive, so they didn't lose all their kids. But it can happen. They're 23 years old. And the other one fell asleep at the wheel, and he just went straight on into a truck and killed him immediately. So, things happen. You guys are certainly old enough to know things happen. You've seen things happen in your lifetime. I have too. But younger people think, they're bulletproof. They just don't, and I did too. I understand, we probably all did when we were younger. But buying a term policy and putting a child term rider on it if they have kids is a great, inexpensive way to get started off, or at least get some coverage and cover everybody until the kids are older and they're out of the house. And you've got something on the husband, or something on the wife, or whether they're married or not, they both need it. Both parents need it, or it's even more important for a single parent, as opposed to, people that are married, and there's two of them. That kid's got to go somewhere, or those kids have to go somewhere and be taken care of, and they need that life insurance policy to basically help them through life, help them get a little bit of education, whether it's through, going to Piedmont or going to big university or whatever, or just paying what it costs to get them through life. That's getting more expensive every day. So the benefits of getting it while you're young is certainly it's less expensive. You're more likely to be healthier and insurable at a young age. So that's a huge point to get them to get it younger. Group life is great if you have it through work, but I run into this a lot where people say, well, I've got it through work. Well, I'll tell you a story. The best man at my wedding had 4 kids, made $100,000 a year, and smoked. So his rates were going to be higher. But if he'd have gotten, even if you smoke when you're younger or use tobacco products, it isn't that bad until you get into your upper 30s or 40 or whatever. And next thing you know, it's double what it normally is for people that don't. So he put it off and said, well, I don't need that. I got it through work. Well, he got cancer. Well, cancer spread. He had to treat the cancer. He had to quit work. Guess what that work policy did? Gone. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it was no use to him at all. It's not controlled by you. That's why you need your own policy, and you control it. And it's great to have group coverage through work. I have it myself. Farm Bureau provides me with it. I take it because it's the least expensive thing I can get, but it's gravy on top of everything else, but only while I'm working. When I leave in a few years, it's gone. I probably won't need it because I've got this other policy of my own. So it's not a big deal. But that surprises a lot of people. It surprised him because he left 4 kids behind, a mortgage, a wife that drove a bus for Fluvanna County, and that's all her income was. His $100,000 a year was gone. She was thrown into financial turmoil big time. And if it wasn't for family helping her out, she'd have lost the house. She'd have lost everything. And she still fell into the bottle and is still there. So that happens a lot because of the pressure and the financial stuff that she went through. So, life insurance through work is good. Take whatever you can get, but don't look at it as the end all. let's see. We've gone over that. Does everybody understand the difference between temporary and permanent now? Whole life and term? And really the need for term, I would say, would be to cover debt, mortgage, car payments, those sort of things, income replacement. And then whole life is more for final expenses because usually, like I have $25,000 policy. That's as much as I figure I'm going to need in the end to cover me and maybe what expenses or what, you know, we don't really have much debt other than the mortgage. But that's going to cover your burial costs, you know, headstone, etc. There's a lot of costs you don't think about until you got to bury somebody. Education cost comes under term. You know, you can't buy $100,000 worth of whole life and expect it to be cheap. It's very expensive that way. I have a few customers and clients that have that much whole life, but not many. Most of them have 25 to 50. And that because it's just so much more expensive. And are you really going to need that much in the end? Probably not. But I started off with $500,000 with a term. I put $250 on my wife. Now we've both gone to $250 each for the new term policy that we got after that 30-year policy ran out. And, you know, it's 3 times more expensive than it was when I was 30, but it is what it is. I didn't expect to have a mortgage at this point in my life, but things happen when you got kids and you got marriages come up and you got to pay for, you know, get somebody married or whatever, redo the house or whatever. And you never see those things coming, you know, until they hit you. But we still got a mortgage. It's not as big as it used to be. Fortunately, my house is worth more than it used to be. So let me think. What else?
Question.
Yes, questions.
I have a whole life insurance policy that I've had like 45 years.
Uh-huh.
Should I still be paying for it?
Well, it's probably a straight whole life policy that basically, yes, you're going to pay for it to the end. Hopefully it wasn't terribly expensive at the time because you've had it for 45 years.
Yeah.
You know, don't get rid of it.
I'm not. I'm not now. I'm too old to get rid of it.
Exactly. You know, that many years ago, there was very little legislation out there to keep people from preying on people and selling them a bad product for too much money. So there are laws in place now that actually, and I don't know that happened to you. I'm not saying that it did. I'm just saying it would have been a much better thing for you to have had a 20 payment type of whole life policy available and pay a little more money for it, especially 45 years ago. It would have been pretty inexpensive to get. Is it a $25,000 policy even? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a nice one.
And it would have been nice to have had that paid up 25 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the reason, you know, he's thinking that way. I was thinking that way, but it pushes some people away because they think, bottom line, I want the least expensive thing I can get away with for now. But they're not thinking 45 years down the road, you know, I'm still paying for this thing. Doesn't it get paid up at some point?
Right.
You may find, and you may call the insurance company that you're with and ask them, are there dividends built up into this policy? Okay. Now, they probably send you a statement every year.
They do.
On that statement, it probably should show you the dividend payout. Okay. If you have dividends available, it's your money. You can use that money to pay your premiums now. Okay. Yep. All you got to do is call them and say, pay my premium this year with the dividends that are built up. Boom. No more payments.
Thank you.
You like that one?
Yeah, I like that one.
A lot of people don't know what those dividends are. And they don't realize you could take those dividends out right now. And, it may be a couple $1,000. It may be $10,000. You could take that money out.
I
And
would call him on Friday. I would call him.
they don't want you to take that money out, but it's
They don't.
yours. It's yours.
Plus, I still have my whole life insurance.
Right. And you still have the same amount of life insurance.
Ooh.
Now, those dividends have made that policy worth more when you die. So if it's $25,000 policy, and let's say it's got $10,000 worth of dividends built up, it's worth $35,000 when you die. But do you really need that? I don't think so right now. Let it pay your premiums.
Yes.
And let it be like, okay, I've got this thing paid up now
Why they
because I
won't
got
tell
dividends
you?
to pay with it.
Why they won't tell you that?
They want you to leave your money where it's at because life insurance companies do invest that money and they make money on it. That's how they stay in business. So don't think bad things about, them for doing that, but because that's totally legal. Southern Farm Bureau Life Insurance Company does it. Every one of them out there do it. Now they're having a hard time finding investments now that pay much like they used to pay, before everything went haywire with interest rates and you just can't even get a money market account that pays 0.5% hardly anymore. But that's your answer right there.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Question, is there a difference in dividends and cash value?
Yes.
And before, I shouldn't make this too hard.
Mm-hmm.
The whole life should have cash value, and there are some term policies that have dividend, that pay dividend.
There are some, exactly. Ours don't.
Okay.
Now, they'll be more expensive typically that have dividends that pay into them, and they will have a little cash value built up over time, but nothing like whole life.
Right. And so, not getting into your business on this.
Go ahead.
It appeared that over that period of time, particularly a whole life back in the time that she purchased it, they paid cash value on whole life policies during that period as opposed to dividends. So she may have a accumulation of both built in it, or is that a possibility?
The cash value is going to be if she was ready to surrender that policy. That's what it's worth right now.
Right.
That's what
okay.
they would pay her.
Mhm.
The dividends are a whole different thing. That's her money that has been paid. She likes that.
Exactly.
That's been paid in over the years, and that there should be a buildup there because she didn't even know about it before. And
So there's a strong possibility that, well, obviously she has cash value also.
yes,
in her
yes,
policy.
no doubt.
And so you have cash value in your policy as well, okay? Of course, the cash value, as he indicated, is as to whether you want to give your policy.
Surrender it, yes.
Surrender the policy. But then you have a cash value in it as well as dividends. Okay, so those are the things that you may want to get with your representative about to go over and ask to explain to you the dividend and the cash value and what the amounts are.
Right.
As I'm sorry, I get your name.
Bill.
As Bill indicated. So you want to, if you haven't made any withdrawals, you should have a pretty good accumulation.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to ask those questions yourself.
Look at your latest statement. I'll bet it's right on there.
Yeah. And
They
then
got to
call
send
me
you a
and
statement every
call me
year.
and I'll just target 25% for that. You know about it.
People call me and they go, man, I just got all these bills. Everything's gone up. I need a new heat pump. I need, this, need that, whatever. I want to cash my policy and what's it worth? And I go, whoa, wait a minute. Let's look at the dividends. Let's look at what you got in dividends, and would this deal with what you got to deal with right now? So take the dividends out and leave the policy alone. Leave it intact. And my goodness, you've had it all this time. Don't pay on it that long and then bail out. It's not the time to do it. So, I mean, if they make the decision, ultimately it's their decision. If they want to cash it out, and I've had many more people in the last 5 years because of financial troubles do that than I've ever seen, in the previous 10 by far. In 2 years' time, people are calling me left and right and going, I got to have that money. I'm like, are you sure this is your last resort? Because you want to leave this alone if you can. If you have to have it, it's your policy, it's your decision, but you'll never get it again at that rate. And you'll probably never have life insurance again because it'll just be out of whack. Uh-oh, sorry. I have to cut that off. It's Medicare people calling me.
Nice to think of.
I get at least 10 calls a day. You're almost 65,
Yes, I am. My question is about grandchildren,
Yes.
but the mother's getting ready to turn 25 in a couple more years, so it wouldn't do her no good. But the great grand, can I put? Because I have Gerber Life for him
Oh,
right
yeah.
now.
You just like I did my grandkids, just like he did his grandkids. I sell them all the time, all day long, to grandparents that want their grandkids to have life insurance. This is a legacy for you. This is a gift for you. Instead of giving you toys and money and whatever, this at some point in your life you'll understand why I left this for you. And this is a base. This is a wonderful base for them to have coming into their adult years. And then it's like, okay, I've got this $25,000 worth of whole life in place, and grandma paid for it, and it's paid up. All I need now is the term. And it's much more affordable to them because they can add term to that as a rider, or they can just get a separate policy that's a term policy. And then they can hopefully do the same for their kids and their grandkids and teach something along the way. My parents did it for me, so I'm carrying on what they did for me. I haven't always been in the position financially to really do that much, but my parents passed on and they left me some money, and that put my kids through college. So I didn't have to use life insurance for that. But at least it was always in place in case something did happen to me to deal with it. Or like I said, to bury somebody if they die young, because it happens. I mean, if the parents don't have life insurance in place for their kids, it falls back on the grandparents a lot of times. Somebody's got to help them somewhere, and then it just creates anxiety, turmoil, and division between families. And guess who is the father of division? We all know who that is. Did you have a question?
No, I was just saying, thinking, because I remember my parents were divorced when I was 8. But my father, what he did was, I guess, because I made him mad when I got 18, he decided to turn over his life insurance policy to me, but I told him I didn't want it. But he ended up dying. And so everything that belonged to him came to me. I didn't want it, but I took it and about made sure he was buried and everything was taken care of that he needed,
Right.
And so I kind of know how it goes with them. My sister, bless her soul, passed away last year, and the same thing happened with her. Made sure that she was taken care of.
Well, there's hardly any better person, especially better than me, telling them or trying to educate younger people about life insurance, is it for it to come from the grandparents or the parents themselves and tell them the story about, why I got my own policy, or boy, I wish I'd have done that when I was younger, because I just didn't know, I was ignorant. I just was hard-headed. I didn't want to put money towards life insurance. I wanted to put it towards fun. You know, when you're young, you can be kind of stupid sometimes. I had plenty of that. Yes.
At what point should you do a conversion when it comes to whole life insurance, or let's either say term? And, what's the advantage in a conversion?
The advantage of a conversion is a conversion is taking term, okay? Let's say you have $100,000 worth of term coverage and you want to convert 25,000 of that, or you can do up to 100,000 if you want. You could convert all of it into whole life. There's no medical, there's no underwriting, there's no questions. It doesn't matter what your health is, they got to do it. That's part of your contract. Now, depending on the company, now most companies work that way. So I'm speaking for mine, for Southern Farm Bureau Life Insurance. Most of them are the same way. My suggestion is to convert it as soon as you can and get that whole life in place, because you're not going to have the conversion opportunity forever. And who knows what might happen to your health. If you go past the conversion period and you go, well, I'll just get it when I'm 65 or 70 or whatever, you're just going to be blown away what's going to happen. When I was written 30 years ago, my term policy was super preferred rates. I had absolutely nothing wrong with me. I still don't medically, but I got super preferred rates, not standard, not even preferred, but super preferred. So there's a huge difference in what your rates are. When you convert, you get that rating. So when I converted, I got super preferred on $25,000 worth of whole life. Now you can't just buy a $25,000 whole life policy and get super preferred rates. They want you to buy at least $100,000 for preferred, or $250,000 for super preferred. Okay, they're bands that they go through. But so you see the difference. If you're converting, you get that super preferred or even preferred rate, as opposed to maybe standard, which is just if you bought a $25,000 whole life policy now, or 20 pay type policy, the best you could get at your age is standard rates. There's nobody out there that's going to give you preferred or super preferred rates unless you went with 100,000 or 250,000. And I kind of doubt it at that point, to tell you the truth. When you're in the 40s, at that point on, most life insurance companies are going to look at you like, we're not going to give you preferred or super preferred rates because you're just getting too old. We're going to give you standard no matter what, even if there's nothing, wrong with you. So conversions can make a huge amount of money difference in what it costs you. Does that make sense?
No, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on how you lose and you gain, depending on how long you had it and your age.
Your age affects it every time you get older. Every year you get older, in your conversion period, what the rate's going to be. So you may as well do it as soon as possible.
So the cutoff for decreasing mortgage policy, what would you say, 50, 55?
We used to sell that type of product. We haven't for years, not even since I've been working for Farm Bureau. I still have policies. They were 30-year decreasing term policies, and I think some of those policies you could certainly convert, yes. But what your question was, I'm not sure I'm following your question.
I'm looking at possible someone else regarding a decreasing mortgage policy.
Mhm.
Hypothetically, your mortgage is $100,000, and it decreased hypothetically over 30 years if it's a 30-year mortgage, and the amount of the policy is $100,000, and as you go on toward that 30 year,
Mhm.
the policy
Gets
amount
smaller.
decreases
Yes.
until that you've gone to 30 or the term of the mortgage.
Right.
That's what, I don't know, am I making any sense?
Well, I'm following you. I mean, I know what a 30-year decreasing term policy is. That's what they all are.
Yeah.
They're not a whole life policy. But I'm not sure I'm following what
To
your
cover
question.
your house, a mortgage policy. You still have mortgage policies, right?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Well, that's the same thing as a term policy. really.
Oh, okay, but it's cheaper when you tie it into your mortgage, is it?
Oh, not always, no.
Okay.
You'd be surprised what banks and mortgage companies charge for life insurance added into your mortgage.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So you should always look at, well, what's this adding to my mortgage payment? And what can I buy my own policy for separately and cover the mortgage? That's what mine's always done. But like I said, we don't even have a decreasing term type mortgage policy like that anymore.
What about people over 60 and 70 years old who don't have insurance? What do you recommend?
I wrote a 60-year-old the other day. He wanted a burial policy for $25,000. When he turns 61, he has to do a full medical. At 60, he does not. He had to do an oral fluid test, which I did myself, administered, and then sent in. Very easy, take 2 minutes. So very good timing for him. But after 60, you've got to expect they're going to look at you closer medically. And they're going to do a full physical by sending somebody out and checking to see, what your blood pressure is. They're going to take blood and they're going to send that to a lab and they're going to look at all that. They're going to look at your medical records no matter anyway. So it's hard to hide anything. What most people try to hide is smoking marijuana is the same thing as smoking cigarettes these days. They don't care. They're not worried about marijuana use. They'll look at it as a smoking rate. And, it's hard for people to hide that because it's hard for them to do without smoking or using marijuana for 2 weeks. It's kind of, they get themselves into a lifestyle, and certainly nicotine is addicting. I've been there before. That was a long, long time ago, but thank God that's over. But that's, I guess when you get into over 60, it does become a lot more expensive, but you just don't know how they're going to rate you until you send in the application and they, you pay the first month's premium. And if they deny you, they'll send your premium right back, so you're not losing anything. It's worthwhile to try and see what happens. They may rate you at a higher rate and it comes back and they go, well, instead of $100 a month, it's going to be $200 a month or $150, and I go to people and I just say, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. Do you want it or not? And sometimes they go, well, instead of 100,000, let's go back to 50, and let's cut the premium that way. And, that's the way we make it work. So it does get a little dicey after 60.
Well, I had a term life for 15 years and it expired last year.
Okay.
And I couldn't afford it after that. It's skyrocketed.
Oh yeah, because they'll let you keep it, but it goes pew with the premium, and it doesn't make any sense.
To convert it to a whole life, that is even worse.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask you how old you are?
64.
64. Okay, same age as me. Do you still have a mortgage?
Yes.
Is that what you're mostly concerned about?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I am right now myself. I think my wife could sell the house and basically have plenty to bury me and pay for the bills and live just fine, to tell you the truth. But a term policy is something you should look into. And, you know, a 20 payment term at your age doesn't make too much sense. You may as well go ahead and get the straight life and pay for it, you know, for the next 10 years. I'm not sure whether they'll even give you a 20-year term, to tell you the truth, but at least the next 10 years are covered.
So I went to a whole life, but now I don't have no insurance. I just have a whole life policy.
Oh, you do have a whole life
I
policy.
got a whole
Okay,
life.
good,
Yeah, I ain't had
good.
to get a whole life. But I had 100,000 term,
Oh, yeah,
and then I had to go to a
25,000 whole life.
Whole
Okay,
life.
well, that makes sense. So you've got the final expenses covered, basically, but not the mortgage.
You said something about a burial policy. Is there a difference between?
Burial policy is a final expense. $25,000 is typical policy for most people. Just different people call it different things.
Okay, still whole life.
Same thing.
Question?
I was just curious. I'm looking back at this, like, I don't work, I've been working over 2 years. But when I was working, I think I had a policy that would pay up to like $4 million if I died.
Hmm.
And when I had an aneurysm, and they actually kind of wrote me off. But it seemed like the caregiver made sure that I lived, so that they had to pay out how much they know to take.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, in the back of my mind, I feel like,
But that was also a policy through work.
yeah.
So when you had to leave work,
But what I was saying, so, but then on the flip side, I had put away for, I didn't have to work since I was 40.
right.
But the thing was, is just that I sit back and, you know, I was always frugal. So I saved everything I had since I started working. I would always save like 35% of my income from the day I started working. And so,
That's good.
yeah, and that was the way my parents taught me growing up in my uncles and everybody. But what I'm saying is I sit back and I look and I try to figure out, really, what do you need to get buried or to, you know?
Average is $23,000
And what's, okay, that's fine.
for everything
Yeah, I
involved.
understand, because I bought a lot of this stuff already.
You can do it cheaper, but
But I'm just saying, but the thing, I'm just wondering, you know, I'm looking to, I'm gonna, you know, we're not gonna live forever.
Right.
You know,
none of us gonna make it out of this thing alive.
But I guess what I'm saying is I'm just thinking outside the box because I only have one grandchild, but I have kids and stuff like that. And then just to make sure that they straight, you know, make sure that, you know, because one of the things I didn't want to do is, you know, I used to always put stuff away for them, but don't tell them what I gave them yet for them, because the minute you do that, they get lazy.
Oh, yeah. Well, you if you hand too much out, it'll spoil them. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen too much. But when they get old enough to be able to understand it, it's good. But that's the nice thing about having a life insurance policy for it that you control, and it's not under their control until you're gone,
Yeah.
at least, because they're the beneficiary. But hopefully at that point, they'll understand what you were trying to do with it and not cash it in, you know, because they want money.
Any more questions? Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Nuckles, for coming to share with us today.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's close with prayer.
There we go.
God, our Father, thank you for this day and thank you for what we've heard. We pray now that you help us to apply it in our lives. Help us to be good stewards of all that you blessed us with. Thank you for Brother Nuckles for coming to share. We pray your blessing upon him and his wife, his whole family. Bless each and every one who heard us. We pray that it be beneficial to them. In Jesus' name we do pray and for his sake. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nutrition Manager.
Anybody want brochures on